Never go to that ranch, Daniel. Promise me. My wife, Elena, had always called it worthless desert land. After her sudden death, the lawyer handed me keys and said the Texas property was now mine. Since Elena always claimed it was valueless desert, I planned to sell it immediately. But curiosity made me drive out for one look before calling a realtor. The moment I unlocked that front door, I went numb with shock. The worthless land was a $50 million oil operation. But Elena hadn't just left me a fortune. She'd left me something else hidden deep in an underground bunker that would reveal far more family secrets than I ever imagined. Before telling you what happened next, if you are watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story from. I want to know how far it has reached. I sat in Mr. Harrington's wood-paneled office 3 weeks after laying my wife to rest, staring at the mahogany desk between us. The place smelled like leather and coffee, but all I could think about were Elena's roses wilting in our backyard because I kept forgetting to water them. In 32 years of marriage, Elena Morales had been my steady ground. She never asked for much, but she'd been unshakable about one thing. I was never to set foot on her family's old land in West Texas. "Just empty desert, my love," she'd always say. "Nothing there but dust and memories." I'd honored her wishes, even when curiosity tugged at me. That was how we worked. I trusted Elena with everything. But Elena was gone now, taken by a stroke on a quiet Tuesday morning while tending to those roses she adored. The funeral had blurred past in a haze of casseroles, condolences, and my 3 kids, Marco, Luis, and Sofia, flying in from Dallas, Phoenix, and Houston long enough to see their mother buried at San Fernando Cemetery. Then they rushed back to their own lives, leaving me alone with a silence that felt suffocating. "Mr. Morales." Harrington's voice was gentle. He was a thin man with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I know this is hard, but there are final matters regarding your wife's estate." Everything felt hard now. Getting out of bed, making coffee for one, even breathing without Elena, each task felt heavier than my 2 tours overseas. Harrington slid a small wooden box across the desk. Inside was an antique brass key on a Longhorn keychain and a sealed envelope with my name written in Elena's neat, familiar handwriting, the same script she used on grocery lists and birthday cards for 3 decades. "What is this?" I asked, my voice rough. "Your wife purchased property in West Texas 3 years ago," Harrington said carefully. "Per her instructions, you were only to be notified after her passing. The deed has been transferred to you, along with all mineral rights." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. Property. Elena had never, not once, mentioned buying anything in West Texas. Harrington cleared his throat and checked his notes again, almost as if he didn't believe the information himself. 2,500 acres in Reeves County near Pecos. It's called Esperanza Ranch. He hesitated, choosing his next words with painful care. "Mr. Morales, based on recent geological surveys and current oil market conditions, the estimated value is around $50 million. The number didn't just shock me, it punched the air out of my lungs. $50 million. Elena, my Elena, who clipped coupons, bought bargain cereal, and argued with me for 2 weeks over replacing a broken microwave, had a fortune tucked away in the desert, and she never said a word. Not a hint. Not a slip. Not even a guilty look over morning coffee. My hands trembled as I picked up the key from Harrington's desk. The brass felt cold, heavier than it should, and the Longhorn charm dangling from it caught a beam of sunlight like a warning sign. In that moment, Elena's voice rose unbidden in my memory, soft, almost fearful. "Promise me, Daniel, never go to that ranch." I had honored that promise for 32 years. 32 years of marriage. 32 years of trusting her completely. But now she was gone, and her secrets, deep, silent, and buried under miles of Texas dirt, were calling me like ghosts refusing to rest. The more I held that key, the more I felt something shift inside me, something cold and unfamiliar. How well had I really known my wife? The woman who laughed at my jokes, who held my face in both hands when I was broken after Afghanistan, who stayed up nights planning our kids' birthdays, that same woman had built an empire in the shadows. As I drove home from Harrington's office, questions clawed at me. Why had she hidden something this enormous? Was she protecting me, or protecting herself? And if she kept this secret, how many more were waiting for me out there in the desert? I walked through our small house that evening like a stranger. The mismatched furniture. The old curtains she meant to replace. The refrigerator covered with our kids' childhood drawings. All of it suddenly felt staged. A life lived on the surface while something far bigger churned underneath. I stared at the family photos lining the hallway. Me, Elena, Marco, Luis. Little Sophia holding a birthday balloon. They smiled at me from behind the glass, but all I could think was, what else did Elena hide from us? What else had she carried alone? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the number again. $50, 000, burned into the darkness like a neon sign. My heart kept asking the same question over and over. Why me? Why now? Why this? By dawn, I had my answer. I was done wondering. Done sitting with unknowns. Done letting a dead woman's secrets pull me under. Tomorrow, I would find Esperanza Ranch. I left San Antonio before sunrise. The city was still half asleep, its streetlights blinking against the fading night. But my mind was loud, echoing with Elena's words. Worthless desert land, my love. Just dust and memories. If that was true, why did those surveys show oil? Why $50 million? Why the secrecy? Why the fear in her voice? The farther west I drove, the emptier the world became. The highway stretched in a straight line toward the horizon, a ribbon of asphalt slicing through open nothingness. Scrub brush. Rock. Endless sky. A landscape so vast it made a man feel small enough to disappear. With every mile, the questions grew heavier. Had Elena planned to tell me someday? Or had she intended to take this secret to her grave? Was this land a treasure? Or a warning? A gift? Or a curse? My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. I wasn't just driving toward a ranch. I was driving toward the truth, toward the last piece of Elena I didn't know existed. The sun rose behind me, painting the desert in harsh gold. Shadows stretched long across the road, and something inside me tightened. If Elena kept a $50 million secret, what else was waiting for me out there? Because one thing was already clear, Esperanza Ranch wasn't just land. It was the beginning of something. And whatever it was, Elena had been terrified of it. The landscape near Pecos was unforgiving, endless scrub brush, jagged rock, and a sun so bright it felt like it could peel the skin off your bones. This was a true oil country. A place where men gambled entire legacies on what might be hiding miles beneath the dirt. Where families tore themselves apart for a slice of mineral rights. Where fortunes were born and buried in the same breath. But the moment I turned onto the dirt road marked Esperanza Ranch, everything inside me shifted. My breath caught in my throat. Because this was not the abandoned, worthless stretch of desert Elena had described. Not even close. A pristine gravel drive stretched out before me, cutting cleanly between sturdy, well-maintained fence posts. It guided me toward a property that looked like it belonged in a luxury ranch brochure rather than the rugged wasteland I'd expected. The main house rose at the end of the drive, big and breathtaking. Native stone. Weathered timber beams. A wraparound porch wide enough for summer nights and stories that lasted until dawn. Massive windows caught the rising sun and glowed like warm embers. Behind it stood a restored barn, polished outbuildings, and, farther off, several oil derricks pumping rhythmically against the sharp blue sky. This place didn't just look expensive. It looked lived in, cared for, loved. A man stepped out of the barn just as I parked. He had the build of someone who'd spent his life working outdoors, broad shoulders, sun-leathered skin, and hands rough enough to sand wood. He wiped them on a rag before extending one toward me. "You must be Mr. Morales," he said. "Name's Wade Thompson. Been managing this place for your wife the past 3 years." 3 years. The words echoed through me like thunder. 3 years, I repeated, barely above a whisper. Wade. I didn't even know this place existed until yesterday. Wade's expression softened in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Mrs. Morales was clear about that," he said gently. "Said you weren't to know until, well." He nodded toward the house. "She put every dime she had into fixing it up. Turned it from a busted-up wreck into something real special." I followed him toward the porch, my mind spinning. Elena, who hesitated to buy fresh flowers, who mended old clothes instead of replacing them, had poured money into a paradise she'd never once mentioned to me. A life she'd built entirely without me. And the terrifying part? She'd planned it this way. Inside, the house felt like stepping into a memory that didn't belong to me. Rich leather furniture arranged with her careful eye. Warm lighting. Shelves lined with books she loved. And pictures. Family pictures. But not the ones hanging in our home in San Antonio. These were different. Snapshots I had never seen. Elena smiling in a way that almost looked free. Sunlight in her hair. Dirt on her jeans. A hand resting on the railing of the porch I was standing on now, like she belonged here in a way I never knew. She had lived another life here. A life beside me, but apart from me. As Wade walked me through the ranch, the truth unfolded piece by piece. A truth Elena had stitched together with precision. She'd restored the main house from the ground up, rebuilt the barn, cleared the land, installed new equipment, repaired old fencing, and, most astonishingly, she'd brought the wells back online with a petroleum company out of Midland. "Wasn't easy," Wade said, stopping beside a ridge overlooking the rigs. "This land looked like hell when she bought it. But your wife, she had grit. Knew what she wanted. Wouldn't take no from anyone." I stared at the horizon where the derricks dipped in steady repetition, each movement pulling more oil, more money, out of the earth Elena had reclaimed. How did she even know there was oil here? I asked quietly. Wade huffed a small laugh. She didn't. Not at first. My heart thumped once, hard. "The oil discovery was pure luck," he said. "Mrs. Morales only bought this place because it was her grandmother's old homestead. A petroleum company approached her about mineral rights 2 years ago. Turned out to be one of the richest deposits in all of West Texas." I gripped the railing in front of me until my knuckles went white. Elena had grown up believing this land was nothing but dust and sorrow. Her family had lost it decades ago. Her grandmother had died grieving it. And somehow, without a word, Elena had bought it back. Why? Why keep that from me? Why hide a fortune? Why create a secret life in the desert? Wade stepped back, giving me space, but his voice carried the weight of something unspoken. "She didn't buy this land for the oil, Mr. Morales. She didn't even know it was here. She bought it for something else. Something that mattered to her more than money." I turned toward him slowly. "What was that?" Wade looked out over the sprawling property, land my wife had resurrected from ruin, before answering. "That's something you'll have to find out for yourself." A chill slid down my spine, despite the heat, and for one breathless moment, the ranch around me felt less like a gift, and more like a warning. Because if Elena hid something this big, what else was buried out here in the desert? What truth had she tried so desperately to keep hidden that she built an entire secret life around it? Esperanza Ranch was beautiful. But beneath the beauty, I could feel something darker. Something waiting. Something I wasn't sure I was ready to uncover. Elena had grown up with nothing, and somehow knowing that made the truth sting even more. She'd been the daughter of migrant workers who moved from field to field chasing seasonal work, a childhood built on blistered hands, long days, and dreams buried beneath survival. Her parents had scraped together every dollar they could for years until they finally bought a modest stretch of land in the 1940s, a piece of Texas soil they intended to pass down through generations. But when the 1980s oil bust hit, everything collapsed. Her family lost the land, lost the security they had built, lost the future they believed they were giving their children. Elena had carried that wound inside her for years, a quiet ache she rarely spoke about. And somehow, while raising our children, while working double shifts, while worrying about bills, my wife had managed to buy that land back. Quietly. Secretly. Completely alone. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question didn't feel like it was meant for Wade. It felt like it was meant for the walls, the floor, the desert beyond the windows. Or maybe for Elena herself, wherever she was now. Wade's expression softened with something that looked very much like sympathy. Can't say for sure, he replied gently. But Mrs. Morales talked about wanting to surprise you. Said she wanted something special for the family. She was always thinking ahead. That was true. Elena had always been planning something. Meals, holidays, savings, futures. Even when she hid things, she hid them out of love. But this ranch, this fortune, this secret, was something else entirely. I wasn't sure if the shock of it was awe or betrayal. I was still trying to absorb the weight of everything when my phone vibrated sharply in my pocket. Marco's name lit up the screen in bold letters, and immediately something cold settled in my gut. He wasn't the type to call out of affection. My oldest son only reached out when he wanted something, and after the morning I'd had, I wasn't sure I had anything left to give. "Dad," he said the second I answered, his tone sharp, clipped, businesslike. "We need to talk. Luis and I know about the ranch. We're flying in tomorrow. We expect a full explanation." Before I could say a single word, before I could ask how he found out, before I could even breathe, he hung up. I stared at the dark screen, my reflection trembling in the glass. My pulse hammered in my ears. The question spun through my mind like a warning siren. How did they find out? It had been less than a day since I learned about Esperanza Ranch myself. Less than 24 hours. And yet somehow my sons, hundreds of miles away, wrapped up in their own lives, already knew everything. Or everything they thought mattered, which right now, to them, meant money. A storm was coming, and I could feel it in my bones. Wade must have read the worry on my face because he stepped closer, his voice steady and calm, like someone who had seen families break under far less. "Your boys?" he asked. I nodded, trying to swallow the tightness in my throat. "They're flying in tomorrow." He exhaled slowly, folding his arms. Families, they don't always handle surprises very well, especially ones with a lot of zeros at the end. That was an understatement. Elena had kept this ranch hidden for 3 years, 3 entire years of secret renovations, oil negotiations, land restoration, financial planning. She had managed all of it without slipping once, without giving me even a hint. And yet in less than a single day after her death's final revelation, my sons were already circling like sharks, issuing demands, expecting explanations, acting entitled to something they knew nothing about. Wade placed a hand on the nearby post, his face grave. "You're going to have a hard day tomorrow, Daniel. You should prepare yourself." But there was no preparing for this. Not for the greed I sensed coming. Not for the confrontation waiting on the horizon. Not for what my sons would say, or what they might accuse me of. The sun dipped lower over the ranch, casting long shadows across the land Elena had reclaimed. The silence around us felt heavy, charged, as if the desert itself sensed the tension building. I looked out over the fields she had fought so hard to recover. And for the first time, a chilling thought crept into my mind. Maybe the ranch wasn't the only secret Elena kept. And maybe the ones still buried were far more dangerous. The Texas sun beat down fiercely as I stood on my wife's hidden ranch, gripping the key to a $50 million secret and realizing, with a hollow ache, that my children saw nothing but profit where I saw Elena's final gift. The air shimmered with heat, the metal key burning in my palm, and for the first time since she died, I felt the weight of just how deeply her absence had carved into all of us. I had come here searching for answers, but instead I was about to face a storm I hadn't seen coming, one that had been gathering long before Elena took her last breath. They descended on the ranch like vultures, rolling up the gravel drive in a sleek black rental SUV that spat dust into the air with each turn of its tires. The doors opened before the engine even stopped, as if urgency alone made them righteous. My sons, who hadn't visited once since their mother's funeral, had somehow managed to coordinate overnight flights from Houston and Denver the moment they caught wind of the money. Marco stepped out first, stiff and polished in a tailored suit that looked absurd against the harsh desert landscape. At 32, He'd inherited Elena's intelligence but none of her warmth, wearing ambition like armor. Luis followed behind him, 29 and softer around the edges, the result of too many business lunches and too few honest days of work. Both carried themselves with the kind of entitlement that made my stomach twist with something between anger and sorrow. Sophia arrived separately, pulling up in her aging Honda Civic from Austin. She stepped out slowly, uncertainty shadowing her usually gentle features. At 26, she still had Elena's soft eyes, but today they were clouded with confusion and something that looked dangerously close to betrayal. She had always been our peacemaker, the glue in a family that often frayed at the edges. Seeing her here now, caught between her brother's greed and my own grief, was a blow I wasn't prepared for. "Dad." Marco's greeting was clipped, his jaw tight and movements sharp. He'd brought a lawyer with him, a thin, pale man who looked like he regretted saying yes to whatever call he'd received at dawn. "We need to discuss this situation." I forced myself to stay calm. "What situation?" "Don't play dumb," Luis snapped before Marco could respond. His voice shook, not with fear, but with anger sharpened by expectation. "50 million, Dad. Mom had $50 million and never told us." Before I could answer, I caught sight of Wade standing quietly in the barn doorway. He saw the tension radiating across the yard like heat off metal and stepped back, disappearing into the shadows. Even he knew this wasn't going to be a simple family argument. "Your mother had her reasons," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady despite the pressure building in my chest. "Reasons for what?" Marco shot back. "For making you the sole beneficiary? For cutting us out? For hiding the biggest windfall this family has ever seen?" "She didn't cut anyone out," I protested, though I already knew my words were bouncing off a wall of resentment. This was her family's land, her responsibility, her story to tell. Luis scoffed openly. "It's money that should have secured our futures, paid off loans, helped with houses, funded college accounts." "What college accounts?" I interrupted, unable to stop the frustration from spilling out. "None of you even have children yet. You're all too busy chasing careers to think about starting families." Sophia recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "That's not fair, Papa," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We're trying to understand why Mom kept this secret from all of us." I looked at her, and for a moment everything around us, the heat, the dust, the ranch Elena had poured her soul into, faded into a dull blur. Sophia's eyes held more than confusion. They held fear. Not of the money, not of me, but of realizing their mother had lived a life they never knew existed. A life built on secrets big enough to shift the ground beneath our feet. Marco stepped closer, eyes narrowing with calculation. "If Mom trusted you with this, then she must have told you something. You expect us to believe you didn't know? That she was pouring millions into a ranch in the desert and you were just, what, clueless?" His words struck deeper than he realized, not because they were true, but because they held the one fear I wasn't ready to confront. Had I really known Elena at all? Or had she been building walls around herself while I remained blissfully unaware? "I didn't know," I said firmly. "I found out yesterday. Just like you." Luis shook his head, disbelief etched across his features. "So you expect us to accept that Mom secretly bought a massive ranch, poured millions into restoring it, discovered oil, and somehow kept it all from you for years? That doesn't even make sense." Sophia looked between us, torn. "Papa, why would she keep this from us?" "From you." I opened my mouth, but no answer came. The truth was simple and terrifying. I didn't know why. And the more I tried to piece together what Elena had left behind, the more I felt something dark pressing at the edges of my mind, whispering that the money wasn't the only thing she'd hidden out here. Before I could respond, the wind shifted, carrying the sound of distant machinery from the oil rigs, a steady, rhythmic reminder that this land wasn't just worth millions. It held secrets. Deep ones. Dangerous ones. And for the first time since arriving at the ranch, I realized something chilling. My children weren't the only ones who had come looking for answers. And whatever Elena had been hiding, we were nowhere near ready for the truth. Marco sensed his chance. Exactly. Sophie, think logically. Dad had to know. Married couples don't hide $50 million purchases. He's been pretending to be the grieving widower while sitting on a fortune. That's not true, I said sharply. Then explain it, Louise pushed. Explain how Mom bought 2,500 acres, managed renovations, hired staff, coordinated with oil companies, without you knowing a thing. I had no explanation, no thread to pull, no logic to cling to. Elena had always been meticulous with our finances. We discussed every major expense, no matter how small. The idea that she'd managed something this enormous entirely on her own felt unreal, almost impossible. But the disbelief twisting in my stomach was nothing compared to what came next. Maybe they're right, Papa, Sophia whispered. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held something far sharper, doubt. Maybe you did know about this ranch. Maybe you're trying to figure out how to keep it all for yourself. Her words hit me harder than any accusation my sons had thrown. Sophia, my gentle girl, the one who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms, was looking at me like I was a stranger. Like I was capable of betraying her. Like I was capable of betraying Elena. Sophie, I reached for her, but she stepped back as though even my shadow might contaminate her. She turned away, her shoulders slumping in defeat as she walked toward Marco and Luis. And Marco, God help me, Marco smiled. A slow, triumphant curl of the lips that told me everything. This wasn't about grief, or confusion, or trying to understand their mother's choices. This was about money, pure and blinding. And my sons had just turned my daughter into a weapon. The desert wind picked up, howling through the ranch like something wounded. Dust swirled around us as I stood there, watching my family fracture right in front of me. $50 million had carved a canyon between us, deep and jagged, leaving each of us stranded on different sides with no bridge in sight. Hours later, Wade found me sitting alone in Elena's office, staring at her empty desk as if it might suddenly offer answers. The house felt suffocating in its silence. Every room echoed with the absence of her voice, her laugh, her presence. Everything felt wrong. Can't sleep either? Wade asked gently as he lowered himself into the leather chair across from me. Mrs. Morales used to sit right there when she worked late. Always planning something. I let out a humorless breath. Planning what? Renovations. Oil wells. Secret properties. I shook my head. Why hide all this? Why keep me in the dark? Wade didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood and walked to the bookshelf behind the desk, Elena's bookshelf. His fingers drifted across the spines the way someone touches old memories. He paused when he reached a slim, worn volume of Emily Dickinson poems, one Elena had loved since college. She told me, Wade said quietly, if he ever seems lost, truly lost, show him this. He pulled the book forward. A soft click echoed through the room. I straightened, my pulse thudding as a section of the bookshelf trembled, then slowly swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Cold air drifted up from below, carrying the faint scent of earth and something metallic. Wade stepped aside. This, he said quietly, is what she didn't want anyone else to find. And as I stared into the stairwell disappearing beneath the house, one thing became painfully clear. Whatever Elena had been hiding down there, it wasn't just about money. It was something deeper. Something dangerous. Something meant for me, and me alone. Jesus Christ, I breathed, my voice barely carrying past the shock throttling my chest. The hidden passage yawned before me, a dark throat carved into the earth beneath our feet, and for a moment I simply stared, unable to reconcile the life I knew with the one Elena had woven in secret. Mrs. Morales had this put in during renovations, Wade explained as he flipped a switch on the wall. Lights flickered to life below, washing upward in a pale glow. Told folks it was a storm cellar, but, well, this is something else. We descended step by step, the concrete stairs cool beneath my shoes, the air shifting from warm ranch dust to something colder, more metallic. The hidden room at the bottom looked nothing like a storm shelter. It looked like something out of a spy thriller, something built for watching, documenting, preparing for battles no one knew were coming. Rows of monitors stretched across the far wall, each one wired into a sleek tower of advanced computer systems. The hum of machinery filled the space like a quiet heartbeat. Filing cabinets stood in neat lines along the opposite wall, their drawers labeled with dates, names, and cryptic shorthand. A single leather chair sat directly in front of the largest screen, positioned with such intention it almost felt like Elena had been sitting there just minutes ago. But it wasn't the equipment that froze me in place. It was the screen. Hundreds of video files covered the display, organized into rows and columns, each one marked with a title that made my stomach drop. Day 1. For Daniel when he's ready. Day 30. About the boys. Day 100. The truth about the money. Day 150. What you can't ignore. Day 200. If they turn against you. 365 files. One for every single day following her death. She made videos, I whispered, barely breathing. Wade nodded slowly. Started about 6 months before she passed. She'd come down here after dinner, spend hours talking to that camera like you were sitting right across from her. My hands trembled as I moved closer to the screen, the cursor hovering over the first video file. The weight of everything, our marriage, our secrets, the land, the money, the lies, pressed down on me. It felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind roaring below, knowing one step forward would change everything forever. With a breath I didn't trust, I clicked the first file. The video opened, and Elena's face filled the screen. Not the weary, fading woman from her final month. Not the version of her lost to strokes and slow decline. This Elena was vibrant, alive, a flash of the woman I'd fallen in love with 3 decades earlier. Her dark hair was pulled back in the simple ponytail she wore while gardening, the same one she'd worn the day we planted our first rose bush in the backyard. Her eyes still held that familiar spark, the mischievous glint that always told me she was carrying a secret or about to tease me. "Hello, my love," she said, and the sound of her voice nearly brought me to my knees. It was warm, steady, heartbreakingly clear, so real I could almost feel her presence beside me. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you found the ranch despite my warnings." Her smile faltered, just barely, as though even from beyond the grave she understood the weight of what she had left behind. "I know you must be confused," she continued. "I know you're probably angry. And I know you have questions about why I kept all of this from you." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. Hearing her speak the words I'd been wrestling with felt like she was reading my thoughts from some unimaginable distance. "But before you judge me," she said softly, "you need to understand what I discovered. What forced my hand. What changed everything." The screen flickered slightly, as if the universe itself leaned closer. Her expression darkened, her tone shifting from tender to deadly serious. "Daniel, there are truths buried in this ranch, in our family, that you were never meant to learn while I was alive. And some of them—" she hesitated, eyes glistening. "Some of them will hurt you more than anything I've ever confessed." My heart thudded in my chest. She leaned closer to the camera. Her next words came out in a whisper, trembling with fear. "But you need to know them now." Then the screen cut to black, leaving me in silence, breathless, knowing the next video would shatter my world even more than the first. My vision blurred with tears as she went on, her voice steady despite the storm she was unleashing into my life. I felt the weight of every word she spoke pressing against my chest, each syllable peeling back a layer of the woman I thought I knew. The more she revealed, the more I realized how little I had understood about the battles she fought in silence. "I know you're confused. Probably angry. Wondering why I kept this from you. The truth is, Daniel," she continued, her tone trembling just slightly, "I bought back my grandmother's land because I discovered something about our sons that shattered me. Something I couldn't tell you while I was alive, because I needed to protect the family first." Her expression hardened with a resolve I had never seen on her face while she lived. Even in death, she seemed stronger than I felt in that moment. "Marco has been laundering money for a cartel operation out of Houston for 2 years, she said, and the room felt suddenly colder. "Luis has been running a Ponzi scheme through his energy consulting firm, stealing from retirees' investments. I have proof of everything, bank statements, recorded calls, documents that could put both boys in federal prison for decades." My world tilted violently. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Our sons. Men I believed I'd raised right, men who carried my name, my lessons, my hopes, were criminals. The truth struck with such force that I felt physically nauseated. How had I missed this? How had Elena carried it alone? I bought this ranch using money from my grandmother's jewelry I'd kept hidden, she said, and suddenly the magnitude of her secrecy made painful sense. I wanted to build something clean for our family, something based on love, not corruption. But I also knew our son's crimes would catch up eventually, and we'd need leverage to protect Sophia and ourselves. She leaned closer to the camera. Her voice softened into the familiar, intimate tone she used when we lay awake together in bed, talking about dreams we never thought would break us. There's one more secret about Luis that will break your heart, my love. But first, you need to see all the evidence I've gathered. The video ended, leaving me sitting in a silence so thick it felt crushing. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I didn't know whether to scream or collapse. Instead, I followed the only thread she had left me, her instructions. Wade waited just outside the office, holding a flashlight as if he had expected me to come undone. He didn't ask what the video revealed. He didn't have to. Something in my face must have said enough. "Follow me," he murmured. We stepped outside into the dark. The ranch was quiet except for the distant, rhythmic thumping of oil derricks pumping beneath the moon. Our flashlights cut through the shadows as Wade guided me toward the old barn. To anyone else, the structure looked abandoned, weather-beaten, sagging in places, nothing but a relic of the past. But Wade's confident stride told another story. "Mrs. Morales was smart," he said as we reached the far wall. He ran his hand along a panel of old wood, stopping at a board that seemed no different from the rest. He tugged it aside with practiced ease. Anyone poking around would think this place is empty. Behind the loose board was a steel door embedded into the barn's frame, so well hidden that even standing inches away, I wouldn't have noticed it. At its center was an electronic keypad, faintly illuminated in the dark. Wade typed in Elena's birthday, and the keypad responded with a soft beep. A moment later, the lock released with a metallic click that seemed unnervingly loud in the stillness. "This wasn't here 3 years ago," I muttered. "No," Wade said quietly. "She had it installed during renovations. Told the contractors it would be a tornado shelter, but she added enough power, ventilation, and internet wiring to make the FBI jealous." The steel door creaked open, revealing a set of concrete stairs descending into darkness. A cold draft rose from below, brushing against my face like a warning, or an invitation. The air smelled faintly of earth, metal, and something else I couldn't identify. I stared down into the void, my heart pounding. Whatever waited below had been built by Elena's hands, driven by her fears, her secrets, and her desperate need to protect us. And as I took the first step into the darkness, one thought chilled me. If this was only the beginning, what truth waited at the bottom? The room was larger than Elena's office, industrial shelves, high-end computers, and dominating the back wall, an enormous evidence board. Photos, financial statements, timelines, printed emails, everything connected with red string like a detective show. "How long was she working on this?" I asked. 3 years, Wade replied. "Started right after she bought the ranch. Said she'd found something that made her sick about the boys." The evidence was devastating. The evidence board felt like a blow to the chest, too detailed to deny, too brutally organized to explain away. Marco's section was the first to catch my eye, and every document pinned beneath his name felt like a betrayal I had never imagined possible. Dozens of bank accounts I'd never heard of were listed across the top row, each linked by arrows to offshore companies and shell corporations with names that sounded like they'd been pulled from a criminal handbook. Photographs showed him meeting with men Wade identified as known cartel affiliates, grainy shots taken from a distance, but unmistakable. There were transcripts of phone calls where Marco discussed wire transfers, coded language, and ways to clean funds before they hit certain accounts. Millions of dollars had passed through his hands, each transaction a small step away from the life I thought he lived, and deeper into the world Elena had been trying to shield us from. Luis's section, displayed right beside it, was just as damning, maybe worse, because of the faces attached to his deception. Printouts of fabricated investment statements lay beneath client lists, each name belonging to an elderly retiree who had trusted him with everything they had. Spreadsheets documented his Ponzi scheme in cold, emotionless numbers, showing how he shuffled funds from one victim to another to maintain the illusion of profit while skimming massive amounts for himself. The deeper I looked, the more apparent it became that Luis had been drowning financially for months, scrambling to keep his scheme from collapsing. And still, he had come home for Christmas, hugged his siblings, and eaten dinner at my table as if nothing were wrong. "She recorded their calls?" I asked, my voice hoarse as I held one of the transcripts. Wade gave a solemn nod. "She got help from a private investigator in Dallas. Former FBI. He knew how to document everything the right way." That was when I noticed a medical folder tucked behind the financial paperwork. It seemed out of place until I pulled it free and saw Luis's name on the tab. Inside were hospital records from Houston, lab results, nephrology notes, imaging scans. The diagnosis was written in bold letters across the top. Chronic kidney disease, stage 4, rapidly progressing toward total failure. "He's dying," I whispered, the words tasting like iron in my mouth. "Mrs. Morales found out 6 months ago," Wade said quietly. He was hiding it. Didn't want to appear weak to his clients. But she recognized the signs. Her father went through the same decline. The reports were devastating. Luis would need a transplant within the year, possibly even sooner. And immediate family were usually the best matches. That was when I saw the last detail Elena had left behind, a test confirming she'd been evaluated for donation. She was compatible. She had been preparing to give him her kidney, even after discovering his crimes. She was going to save him, I murmured, overwhelmed by the magnitude of her sacrifice. Even after everything he'd done. Wade nodded. That's who she was. But then, the stroke happened. I stared at the stack of medical papers as a new understanding settled over me like lead. Luis's crimes weren't born from easy greed. They were fueled by desperate fear. A dying man trying to secure money before his body failed him. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it complicated everything. And now, the secrets Elena died protecting were about to explode in the worst possible way. The meeting had been set for Monday morning. Marco and Luis arrived at the ranch with their lawyers, convinced they would walk away with millions. Their confidence was almost nauseating, and their smugness suggested they believed they held all the power. They'd even persuaded Sophia to drive up from Austin again, her presence clearly intended to sway me emotionally. Seeing her walk in behind them, caught between loyalty and confusion, stabbed at something deep inside me. I sat at the head of the long dining table, which Wade had transformed into a boardroom large enough to host the representatives from Lone Star Energy. Contracts, geological surveys, and valuation reports were spread across the polished wood surface. The atmosphere felt tense, too many motives colliding in one place. "Dad," Marco began, leaning forward as if he were addressing a client instead of his father. His tone dripped with condescension. "Our proposal is simple. A three-way split of all assets with professional management to maximize returns." Luis nodded eagerly and slid several pages my way. "I've run the numbers. We're talking generational wealth, trust funds, debt cleared, maybe even a family foundation in Mom's name." I stared at my son, the one who had lied to investors, fabricated financial statements, and stolen from people who trusted him, hearing him talk about trust funds with the confidence of a man who believed he still belonged at the head of a financial empire. The irony was suffocating. The Lone Star executives watched quietly, taking in every word. I kept my expression neutral despite the storm building inside me. They didn't know yet what Elena had uncovered. They didn't know what my sons had done. But they would. Marco continued talking, unaware that the ground beneath him was about to give way. "Dad, this is the best path forward. We can." I lifted a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Because I finally understood something Elena had tried to teach me long before she died. This wasn't just a negotiation. It was the moment everything would either fall apart or finally come into the light. And the truth waiting in the next minutes would destroy someone. Maybe several someones. I drew in a slow breath, feeling the weight of the evidence still burning in my hands. Before we discuss anything, I said, my voice calm but razor-sharp, our partners need to know exactly who they're sitting at this table with. And when I reached for the folder Elena had prepared, the one she built over 3 years, documenting every crime, every lie, every wound, Marco stopped smiling. Luis froze. Sophia whispered my name. The Lone Star executives leaned in. And I opened the folder, knowing the next words out of my mouth would change my family forever. That seems reasonable, I said calmly. But before we finalize anything, I think our partners should know exactly who they'd be involved with. I slid a thick manila folder across the table to Tom Brennan, Lone Star's regional director. Financial histories for both my sons. I figured you'd want to review them before committing to long-term agreements. Marco's confident smile faltered as Brennan opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, transaction logs, recorded calls, everything Elena had collected about their crimes. What the hell is this? Marco snapped. Evidence, I said. Proof that my eldest son has been laundering cartel money through his law practice. And proof that Luis has been running a Ponzi scheme targeting elderly investors. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of pages turning. Brennan's expression darkened with every sheet he read. These are extremely serious allegations, he said quietly. Dad, you can't seriously believe, Luis stammered. I believe what the documentation shows, I cut in. Transfers. Phone logs. Witness accounts. Your mother spent 3 years building a case no attorney could poke holes in. Sophia stared at her brothers, horrified. Is this true, Marco? Luis. Their silence said everything. Brennan shut the folder with a force that seemed to echo through the entire room, then stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. His jaw was tight, his expression carved from ice. Mr. Morales, Lone Star Energy cannot continue this partnership. All contracts are terminated pending further legal review. He didn't hesitate, didn't offer a second glance toward the men who had spent the last hour trying to manipulate the situation in their favor. He simply gathered his materials, papers, folders, survey reports, and headed toward the door as if fleeing a crime scene. Wait! Luis shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. You can't just... We don't do business with criminals, Brennan said flatly, without slowing down or looking back. His words hung in the air like a death sentence, cold and final. A moment later, the door closed behind him, and silence descended across the room. The silence didn't last. Marco's face twisted into something unrecognizable, a blend of rage, humiliation, and panic. He spun toward me with such force that his chair toppled over behind him. You son of a... You've ruined us. Do you have any idea what you just did? His voice shook, not just with fury, but with fear, fear of consequences he'd never imagined would reach him. I protected this family's integrity, I replied, meeting his glare without flinching. Something you both should have considered before breaking the law. Sophia stood near the table, tears streaming down her face. The betrayal in her eyes hurt more than anything her brothers could have said. How could you lie to us? She cried. How could all of this be true? Her voice cracked, her shoulders trembling as if the weight of the truth were too much for her to hold. But Luis didn't respond to either of us. He didn't even seem to hear us. His face had gone ghostly pale, drained of color as if the life had been sucked out of him. His hand moved instinctively to his side, fingers pressing hard against his ribs. His breathing turned shallow, desperate, each gasp more strained than the last. Luis, I said, my anger dissolving into fear in an instant. What's wrong? He opened his mouth, but the words never came. He tried to stand, pushing off the table with trembling hands, but his legs buckled beneath him. He took one unsteady step and collapsed to the floor with a thud that sent shockwaves through the room. As the Lone Star executives disappeared down the driveway and Marco screamed about lawsuits, Luis lay on the floor, shaking violently. His eyes fluttered, his skin turning clammy, his breaths coming in ragged, broken bursts. Call 911. I shouted, dropping to my knees beside him. The next few minutes blurred into frantic motion. Marco fumbling with his phone, Sophia kneeling beside me, whispering Luis's name over and over as if her voice could tether him to consciousness. By the time the ambulance arrived, Luis was barely responsive, drifting in and out of awareness. The ride to San Antonio was the longest hour of my life. I sat beside him, gripping the edge of the gurney as the paramedics worked with calm urgency. They checked his vitals, adjusted his oxygen, radioed ahead to University Hospital with updates I tried not to interpret. But I didn't need medical training to see the gravity of the situation. His blood pressure kept dropping, his skin turned cold beneath my touch, and his face grew paler with every passing mile. Marco followed behind in his car, his earlier fury replaced by a terrified silence. For once, he didn't look like a man trying to control the narrative. He looked like a son facing the consequences of secrets too heavy to carry. Sophia insisted on riding in the ambulance with us, refusing to sit anywhere except beside Luis. She held his hand tightly, whispering prayers in Spanish, words she hadn't spoken since childhood, words she clung to now as if they were lifelines. "His kidneys are failing," one of the paramedics told me as we pulled into the emergency bay. His tone was professional, but the worry behind his eyes betrayed the truth. "We need to start dialysis immediately." Everything moved in fast forward after that. Nurses rushed Luis through sliding doors. Machines beeped. Papers were shoved into my hands. Questions shot at me from doctors and staff. The hallways blurred into smudges of white and fluorescent light, and all I could do was follow, helpless and terrified, as the medical team fought to stabilize him. Hours passed in fragments. Sterile waiting room chairs, lukewarm hospital coffee, snippets of conversations I barely absorbed. Every time a nurse walked by, my heart jumped, hoping for news and fearing it at the same time. Sophia sat curled in a chair beside me, head in her hands. Marco stood against the wall, his back rigid, guilt eating through the anger he'd clung to. Eventually, footsteps approached. A woman in a white coat stepped toward us, and the room seemed to still around her. She had the calm steadiness of someone used to delivering life-altering news. Dr. Sarah Brennan, the chief nephrologist. She pulled off her gloves as she approached, her expression composed but shadowed by something heavy. She looked at me first, and the way her eyes softened told me everything before she said a single word. The news wasn't going to be good, but how bad it truly was, I wouldn't realize until she spoke the next sentence. "Mr. Morales," she said quietly, pulling me aside, "your son is in end-stage renal failure. Without immediate intervention, he has weeks left, not months." "What kind of intervention?" I asked, already knowing. "A kidney transplant," she said gently. "He's been managing this for some time, but the stress today pushed him into crisis. We need to find a compatible donor as soon as possible." Marco came up beside me, catching the end of her explanation. "What are his chances if someone in the family matches?" "Very good," Dr. Brennan said. "The procedure is routine. Recovery is about 6 to 8 weeks." Nurses drew blood from me, Marco, and Sophia. The compatibility tests would take hours, but immediate family had the highest likelihood of matching. "I should have seen this coming," I murmured. "Your mother knew. She was tested, found compatible, but she never told him." "Mom knew Luis was sick?" Sophia whispered. "She knew everything?" "Yes," I said. "About the kidney failure, about the crimes, about the desperation driving both of your brothers." For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Marco looked genuinely remorseful. "Dad, I never meant for things to spiral like this. The money, the choices, they started small. I was trying to help Luis with treatment he couldn't afford. And then it became about more than treatments," I said quietly. He nodded. "Yeah. It turned into trying to look successful, to prove something, to live up to an image. Mom would be ashamed of us," he whispered. Sophia reached across the chairs and took his hand. "She'd be proud that you're here now, that you want to save him." As we sat in the sterile waiting room, something in our family began to shift in ways I hadn't thought possible just hours earlier. The bitterness that had poisoned every conversation since Elena's death slowly loosened its grip. The accusations, The suspicion, the sharp words that had driven wedges between us all began to lose their power. Beneath the wreckage of the past few weeks, something older and stronger emerged: love. Complicated, bruised, imperfect love, but love nonetheless. It had been buried under grief and greed, but it was still there, waiting to breathe again. "I'm sorry, Papa," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling as she wiped tears from her cheeks. "I should have trusted you. I shouldn't have doubted you like that. You were protecting your brothers," I told her gently. "That's what family does. Even when we don't understand everything, we try to protect each other." She leaned into me, and for a brief moment, I felt the Sophia I remembered, the little girl who used to tug on my sleeve during storms. Marco sat across from us, silent, staring at the floor. Luis's collapse had stripped every layer of arrogance from him. Fear does that. It forces truth to the surface faster than any confrontation ever could. As the sun dipped outside the hospital windows, the sky shifting to muted oranges and purples, Dr. Brennan returned. She held a manila folder tucked under her arm, the edges slightly bent from being handled too often. I expected relief in her expression, news of compatibility, next steps, a plan to save Luis. But instead, confusion clouded her features. Something else lingered there too. Concern, maybe even sorrow. "Mr. Morales," she said quietly, "we have the test results. There's something unusual we need to discuss." A cold ripple traveled down my spine. She led us into a small consultation room, the walls bare except for a clock ticking too loudly. She spread the lab reports across the table with slow, deliberate movements. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the papers. Her silence was heavier than the air around us. "Mr. Morales," she began carefully, "the compatibility testing revealed something unexpected. You're not a match for Luis, but the blood work showed genetic markers that prompted further testing." I felt Marco tense beside me. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Dr. Brennan slid a DNA report toward me. The language was clinical, detached, but the words might as well have been carved into stone. Probability of paternal relationship, 0%. My vision blurred. I don't understand," I managed, though a cold dread inside me whispered that I did understand. "Just not fully, not yet." "Luis is not your biological son," Dr. Brennan said softly. "The genetic markers indicate no familial connection." "I'm truly sorry. I know this is difficult to hear." Difficult didn't begin to describe it. 29 years of fatherhood flashed through my mind, teaching him to ride a bike, cheering at his graduation, comforting him through heartbreaks, watching him grow into a man. Every memory slammed into me like a wave. I felt unmoored, drifting. "There has to be a mistake," I whispered. Desperation sharpened my voice. "Run it again." "We did," she replied. "Twice. The results were the same." Sophia covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Marco stared at me, pale, as if he were realizing none of us truly knew our mother. Not the way we thought we did. The drive back to the ranch passed in a fog. I barely remembered gripping the steering wheel or the road stretching in front of me. Wade waited in silence, sensing the storm inside me without needing details. He guided me back to Elena's hidden room without asking a single question. The dim lights, the cool underground air, the faint hum of the computers, all of it seemed distant, unreal. With hands shaking so badly I could hardly steady the mouse, I opened the video titled "Final Message About Luis." Elena appeared on the screen, and the sight of her nearly knocked the breath out of me. She looked older, worn, the weight of years of secrecy etched into the lines around her eyes. Her shoulders sagged as if she had been carrying something far heavier than just financial burdens or hidden property. Her expression held sorrow, regret, and a haunting kind of love. "My darling Daniel," she began, her voice softer than I remembered. "If you're watching this, then you've learned the truth about Luis." My heart pounded hard enough to hurt. "I can only imagine the pain you must be feeling right now," she continued, tears glistening in her eyes. "And I'm so sorry for what I did. I should have told you years ago, but I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of destroying the family we built." My breath hitched. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. When you were deployed, she whispered, I was lonely, overwhelmed, and I made a mistake. Luis was conceived during that time. I thought I could bury the truth, protect you from it. But secrets have a way of rising, especially the ones built on guilt. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the grief in them felt like a knife. There's more you need to know, she said, her voice trembling. She leaned closer to the camera. And with that single movement, I knew whatever came next was going to break me in ways I wasn't ready for. My darling Daniel, she began, if you're watching this, then you know the truth about Luis. I can only imagine the pain you're in, and I'm so sorry for what I did to our family. My vision hazed with tears as she continued. When you were deployed to Afghanistan for your second tour, I was lonely, scared, and I made the worst mistake of my life. I had an affair with Jeff Collins, someone I met in the base support group. It only lasted a few weeks, but Luis was conceived then. It felt like a blow to the chest. My wife, my Elena, had betrayed me while I was risking my life overseas. I wanted to tell you when you came home, she said, voice trembling. But when I saw you hold Luis for the first time, saw the love in your eyes, I couldn't destroy that. You became his father in every way that mattered. She swallowed hard. I kept Jeff's information all these years through a private investigator. He moved to El Paso, became a construction foreman, married, had children of his own. He never knew about Luis. But when I found out about the kidney disease, I had him tested. Secretly. She paused. He's a match, Daniel. Her voice dropped to a broken whisper. The ranch, the oil money. All of it was my attempt to make amends for the lie I lived for 29 years. I wanted to give you something that would secure your future, because I knew one day the truth would come out, and you might never forgive me. Tears streamed down her face on the screen. Jeff Collins lives in El Paso. He's a good man who made a terrible mistake with a married woman decades ago. The investigator's contact is in the blue folder. Jeff doesn't know about Luis, but I believe, I pray, he'll want to help save the son he never knew. The video faded to black. Her last words echoed in the silence. I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry. 2 weeks later, I sat in a small coffee shop in El Paso, staring across the table at a man whose eyes mirrored Luis's so perfectly it made my pulse stutter. Jeff Collins was 54, with gray at his temples and the rough, scarred hands of a man who spent his life building things with quiet determination. He looked nervous, shifting slightly in his seat as if unsure whether he belonged in this conversation or in my life at all. I never knew, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena never told me she was pregnant. If she had, I would have tried to help. I would have done something. She was protecting everyone, I replied. The words felt heavier than I intended. She always thought ahead, even when the rest of us didn't see the danger coming. Jeff nodded slowly, pulling out his wallet to show me photos. His wife, Linda, smiling in a bright summer dress, and 2 teenage daughters with braces and sunburnt cheeks. I've been married to Linda for 22 years. They don't know about what happened with Elena. But when you told me Luis needed a kidney, he exhaled shakily, I couldn't walk away. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Testing at El Paso General took 3 long days. Each hour of waiting tightened something deep inside me. When the results finally came back, Jeff was confirmed as a perfect match. Relief washed over me, but it carried a strange undercurrent, a sense that the past was resurfacing, clawing its way into the present whether I was ready for it or not. As we waited for the surgery date to be assigned, I spent hours with Jeff. The more I learned, the clearer it became that he was a decent man, a man who coached Little League, helped elderly neighbors fix their roofs, and never once complained about the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He was nothing like the enemy my fears had painted. Instead, he was quietly willing to save the life of a son he never knew he had. I want to meet him before the transplant, Jeff said one evening, his voice steady but hopeful. He deserves that much. And I need him to know I'm not here to replace you. The meeting took place at the ranch, on the porch Elena loved so much. Luis sat wrapped in a blanket, pale but determined. Marco and Sofia hovered protectively beside him, an unspoken truce binding them together for the first time in years. "You've got your mother's stubborn streak," Jeff said gently, offering Luis a small smile. "And apparently my kidney's habit of giving up early." Luis laughed, a soft, tired sound that still managed to brighten the air. "Lucky me. Giving you a kidney isn't about claiming you," Jeff continued. "Daniel raised you, loved you. He's your father. I'm just grateful I can help." After Jeff left, my children asked me to sit with them in Elena's office. The weight of everything unsaid hovered between us. Marco cleared his throat, but his voice cracked on the first word. "Dad, I'm so sorry. For the crimes. For turning Sofia against you. For doubting you when you never deserved it." "I'm sorry too, Papa," Sofia whispered. "I should have trusted you. I should have remembered who you are." Luis leaned forward despite his exhaustion. "You had every reason to walk away from me when you learned the truth. But instead, you're helping save my life. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." I looked at my 3 children, broken, humbled, but finally honest, and felt Elena's presence settle over us like a warm hand on my shoulder. "You're my children," I said softly. "Not because of blood, but because I chose you. Because of love. That doesn't disappear because you made mistakes." Marco swallowed hard. "Even after everything we did?" "Especially after everything you did," I replied. "That's what real fathers do. We love you through your worst moments, and we help you become better." The month leading up to the surgery became a blur of restorative decisions. Marco cooperated with investigators, working tirelessly to return stolen funds. Luis contacted his victims one by one, trying to make amends before he faced the operating table. Sofia took leave from her teaching job to manage the avalanche of appointments, documents, and emotional weight none of us had been ready to carry. One evening, as we stood watching the oil rigs pump steadily against the fading sunlight, I whispered, "Your mom would be proud." Sofia leaned her head on my shoulder. "She'd be proud of you most of all, Papa. For choosing forgiveness instead of anger." The night before Luis's surgery, I returned to Elena's secret room one last time. Her face appeared on the screen, full of hope, full of life, full of the love that had guided her even through her mistakes. "I know you're angry with me, Daniel," she said softly. "But everything I did came from love. Complicated, imperfect human love." As I climbed the stairs afterward, I realized she had been right all along. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by the people who choose to stay, who fight for each other even through heartbreak, and who refuse to give up when everything falls apart. And as the house settled into silence, one final thought chilled me. Elena had built this ranch to protect us. But some secrets were never meant to stay buried forever. Even in death, she was still teaching us what mattered. Outside, the oil rigs continued their steady rhythm, pulling wealth from the land she had reclaimed. But her real legacy wasn't measured in money. It was the reminder that love, forgiveness, and second chances could mend the deepest wounds. Looking back on everything that happened after Elena died, I understood how close I came to losing my family forever. The secrets, the lies, the money, they nearly destroyed us. But sometimes life uses our darkest moments to show us the truths we've ignored. Don't make my mistakes, friends. Don't let pride or fury drown out what truly matters. When I uncovered my son's crimes, my first instinct was revenge. When I learned of Elena's affair, I wanted to resent her memory. But forgiveness isn't about what others deserve. It's about what love asks of us. This true story taught me something I'll never forget. Family isn't defined by DNA or perfection. It's defined by choosing to love even when it hurts. Luis may not share my blood, but he's my son because I chose to raise him, protect him, and forgive him. That's what real fathers do. Elena's ranch became more than an inheritance. It became a place where broken people learn to heal. These stories I'm sharing aren't really about oil money or family drama. They're about second chances, about how life can take our worst mistakes and turn them into something meaningful. The oil wells still pump on that Texas land. But the real treasure is what I learned. Love is stronger than blood. Forgiveness closes wounds. And a true family is built on choice, not genetics. What would you have done if you were in Daniel Morales' place? Let me know in the comments below.